thank you again for joining our webinar today and for taking a few minutes out of your schedule. For those of you who I've not had a chance to interact with yet, my name is Scott Schliebner. I am Senior Vice President of Scientific Affairs, and I lead the Center for Rare Diseases at ICON, formerly PRA Health Sciences. I have a fantastic team of people focused exclusively on rare disease clinical development, and much of our focus is on how do we make clinical trials more patient-focused? How do we reduce the burden of clinical trial participation for patients and their extended care circle? And how do we move clinical trials into a more modern, patient-friendly paradigm? So very excited for today's topic on supporting caregivers in clinical research, navigating the pandemic. And I am thrilled to welcome our guest with us today. Cristol O'Loughlin is someone I've had the chance to get to know over the last couple of years and work with. Cristol is CEO and founder of Angel Aid. Angel Aid is really focused on uplifting the entire family by caring for the caregivers. Let's not forget about those people who are taking care of the rest of us. Relief for mothers who need it most. Cristol, you're also, I know, directly impacted by rare diseases in your family, and you've been a caregiver and can speak so much to this kind of important topic that might be a little bit new for folks. So welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely, Scott. Thank you. I am so honored to be part of this conversation and representing the 350 million rare families that are on the planet. So if you are not familiar with rare disease, I will just say rare is not rare. Okay, this is 1 in 10 Americans and 1 in 15 families worldwide. So these are your friends and your neighbors and people at school, and you just may not realize that there's a rare disease behind what some of the patients are dealing with today.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. And if you're out there joining us today, and maybe you aren't specifically focused in working in the rare disease space, the concept here of patients and caregivers and caring for the caregivers really could also apply to really any other type of sort of therapeutic area or disease state. It's really this idea of extending the concept of patient-focused or patient-centric or patient centricity or whatever your sort of favorite terminology is, extending that from like, let's just think about the patients to let's think about that broader care circle. So in our work as a team in the Center for Rare Diseases, we've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of rare disease patients and learn about their experience in clinical trials, and also learn about why they haven't participated in clinical trials in some instances. And they've been very forthcoming with sharing challenges and burdens, either of I participated in a trial and this is what was hard about it, or I didn't participate in a trial because of X, Y, and Z. So we've learned a lot from patients, but we know that's really just sort of the tip of the iceberg in a way. Patients are our ultimate stakeholders and our ultimate customers in a way, but we also know that they have a support network around them that is helping to facilitate this. And in rare diseases, of course, we also have so many rare diseases occurring in children, right? So we're talking about parents being involved. We're also talking about elderly with caregivers. So with that, you can see a picture of us here. So with that, I'd like to kind of move to a question for you, Cristol. So we're thinking about patients. I think there's been great progress with how we've moved to becoming more patient-focused. Certainly a lot more that we can do. But how do we extend and talk about family support? Because there are so many different kinds of support for families. Can you share with us a little bit on kind of what is that big spectrum of support?
Absolutely. Well, you've been talking about patients. Half the patient population in rare disease is children, right? So we know that the caregiver support is incredibly important, because these are the individuals that are making decisions on behalf of their child or their patient adult child, right? It's not all under 18 minors. Many of these patients have grown into adulthood but need young adulthood and adulthood and need ongoing support. So parents are involved in clinical trial decisions and advocacy decisions, treatment decisions, and in our effort to support the whole family, we're often like talking past each other on support. So what do we mean by support? And there's a really great article that was published by Psychology Today, where they surveyed and interviewed and interacted with a whole slew of rare families, patients and caregivers. And the kind of support that brings a sense of well-being will surprise you, right? So the 4 kinds of support are informational support, tangible support, emotional support, and companionship. Okay, and so informational support and tangible support is kind of that laundry list of things that have to get done. What is this disease? What are the symptoms? What doctor do I go to treat those symptoms? Are there any clinical trials? How do I get enrolled? How do I get insurance coverage for my my claims, right? What medical devices do I need at home to help manage this experience for my patient child or patient adult? That's all the informational and tangible support. That's the triage list of things that have to get done, right? Kind of puts you in the left brain. But the informational support and companionship is where that caregiver or that patient feels that someone understands their feelings about what's happening to them. Someone really is truly listening. Someone is engaged at a heart level with what they're experiencing, and that they're in companionship with somebody that actually is either going through a similar experience or has been exposed to the experience. That is what brings relief. And it makes sense, right? We've been living through this pandemic and we've all been experiencing some sort of traumatic impact from this pandemic experience. And what brings us relief? I mean, Scott, it's you and I, right? I mean, I get relief just talking with you. It's like, it's the human side of connecting with people, with their feelings and with their hearts that makes all of the other things possible, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs in a way, where we've been in the clinical development space, we've been focused on some things like how can we support travel and financial reimbursement and, like you said, maybe information. And that's great. That's a good start. But there's so much more beyond that that we're not really quite yet tackling, these other areas of support, as you talked about. And for those of us, again, let's say you're working from home today, and this is one of the many Zoom calls you'll be on, as we still kind of battle ourselves through the pandemic, and we know that it's different depending on where you are geographically. We have this ongoing chronic, a lot of my colleagues use the word the grind, right? We're sort of in a grind, and this grind is a marathon that is wearing some of us down, and we have a bubbling mental health crisis kind of out there around us. People are struggling, rightly so, and there are a lot of extra challenges on top of what people might already be dealing with. So, it kind of moves us sort of to our next sort of question here around, a lot of us are familiar with the term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. An event occurs and there's all this sequelae that happen. What we're in right now is where are we? 18 months into a chronic grind of an event that might not be impacting us dramatically day to day, but there's like this cumulative chronic wearing downness. Can you talk to us, Crystal, a little bit about this concept of chronic traumatic stress disorder, CTSD?
Yes, I would love to. And in fact, I want this to be the topic of my next TED Talk. Okay, so Scott, that I did a TED Talk on caring for the caregivers. And it was largely about our experience as the Barrett family, caring for my 3 older brothers who had a rare disease and passed away at 12, 18, and 19 years old, right? So 3 of my 4 brothers were born with this genetic disease and passed away from it. And for decades, I witnessed this chronic stress right, within the family of caring for healthy individuals in the family and medically fragile individuals in the family. And whenever I would hear like, oh, PTSD, you know, your parents are struggling with PTSD, or you know, I would listen to that and I would go, no, 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 this isn't post-traumatic stress. This isn't like a stressful event and then now we're recovering from it. This is ongoing chronic stress, right? And so I've spent a lot of time looking into this. And there's a researcher out of UCLA, excuse me, UCSF. I went to UCLA, that's why I said that. But there's a researcher out of UCSF named Dr. Alyssa Apple. She is one of the preeminent stress experts, and she has studied at a deep level the impact of caregiving on your stress level. And what we know about a stressful event is, you know, your cortisol spikes and you go into this kind of heightened awareness state, and then you go into recovery. But when you're a caregiver, you elevate into this stressful state, and now you're buzzing at that higher level, right? You are in this for the long haul. And so the relief that you bring to CTSD or to a caregiver is different than trying to recover from a situational traumatic experience. And that relief comes in the form of really daily micro moments of self-care. And that's what we work with our community on, and that's what we work with all of our partners in the rare disease space. So we are collectively, as a community of professionals, we are in chronic states of stress. And so those few little tips and tools can make a huge difference. I'll just mention a couple of them. Breathing, slowing down, and just taking a few deep breaths before a meeting or before you head into a transition from work life into home life. Breath work is the number one thing that we could do. We just got to remember to breathe.
Simple stuff. Simple stuff. Simple stuff. Well, you know, with this idea, CTSD, a lot of us, you know, who might be struggling with things these days might say things like, well, you know, I'm employed and I'm healthy and I really shouldn't complain. Everything's really fine. But so there's not really a single event we can point to that's like causing stress, but this idea of a chronic, back to this grind terminology, this chronic sort of low level stress. Do you feel like, so trying to get more familiar with this topic and what we can do about it, do you think that compared to like a PTSD, this is something that will start to get maybe a little bit more recognized, and maybe people will recognize that this is really truly a valid sort of form of stress and something we need to be thinking about?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, PTSD is a line item in a mental health, rule book, tool book, right? This is a diagnosed condition. CTSD is not, but it's why I keep talking about it, because we're familiar with PTSD, and we want to just kind of shift the thinking on the chronic traumatic stress. And I mean, I think that's a nice kind of entree into a classic mental health question, and we can all apply it to our own lives, is this. Check in with yourself, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how supported do you feel in this moment? And 1 is, I am not supported. I feel hardly supported at all. And 10 is, I'm extremely supported. And so if you ask yourself, you just take a moment, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you in that range? If your answer is in the 1 to 5 range, then you know you're more on the crisis end, right? You're not resourced, you're not feeling emotionally resourced. And there's no judgment. Maybe you are fully resourced, but if you don't feel that way, it doesn't resonate, right? So if you are in that state, reach out to a family member, reach out to a professional, but talk about it, right? If you're in the 6 to 10 range, then we could talk about all the wellness methodologies on the planet, like yoga and breath work and, you know, exercising and good eating, right? Because somehow you found a way to manage yourself, but we want to elevate that ability to reach out and ask for help, not only in rare families, but really in the general public.
Yeah. Such a stigma. I know. My dogs are next to me, caring for each other at the moment and distracting me. I'm going to ignore that. We're moving along. This is again a flash webinar. We're moving quickly. We're going to wrap up here shortly, but I'd like to, this is so important and we had so much to talk about that what we've decided to do is to break our conversation into two parts. So this is part one. I would like to just kind of one last little tidbit here on our conversation. So we're talking about caring, and we have people out there that might be in clinical development or designing clinical trials, and how is this applicable to me and what practical considerations are there? Well, this idea that we need to think about patients, and if you want patients enrolling in a clinical trial, we need to make things easier for them. And part of this, of course, is just extending this concept again of patients to caregivers, right? So it's not just supporting patients, but what else can we do with that care circle to help that whole family unit or care circle group participate in a clinical trial, right? So there's a lot of practical things, and maybe at our next call, we can talk a little bit about that, but you also focus specifically on mothers. And I'm wondering if you can give us just a little snippet on why mothers are so critical to this process. And then we can wrap up and share a little bit on our next webinar.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking, Scott. I mean, mothers are the primary caregiver in 82% of families in the rare disease space. So we know that focusing on a mother, on a grandmother, on an aunt within the family, we can uplift the whole family by supporting that individual. So that's where the focus comes. It's never an exclusion of any other member of the family, rare fathers included, right? It's just our belief that this is a nice entry point into the family. And as a, maybe an additional note on the PTSD and the CTSD and the impact on the family is we can do so much by looking to other communities that have suffered, right? So looking at military and veterans caregiving, right? Or senior and dementia care. In those communities, they have really mature caregiving models, and I think that's what we're going to explore in our next flash webinar is how can we take the best practices that have been learned in these other areas and apply them into our world. So
thank you for a glimpse on that. Right, so here's our reminder, part 2 of this flash webinar. Flash, keep it quick. Wednesday, December 15th. If this resonated with you, if you'd like to hear us extend this idea beyond just patients to caregivers themselves, please join us on December 15th. I'd like to thank Cristol from Angel Aid for joining us today. Again, that is angelaidcares.org to learn more about what Angel Aid is doing. The concepts we're talking about, both CTSD as well as caring for the caregivers, are going to be a little bit new for people, right? And this is a little bit of some innovative thinking. So please join us next time to hear a little bit more on this event. Thank you, ICON, for sponsoring. Thank you, Syscript, for co-sponsoring and supporting us. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.